What's up guys, this is Coach Donny with ElevateYourself.org. In this video we'll talk about serve-receive rotations for a 5-1 offense, and this video was suggested by DM Productions, so thank you so much for this video suggestion. First we'll start off with learning the various positions on the court. RB stands for right back, RF is right front, MF is middle front, LF is left front, LB is left back, MB is middle back. These areas are also noted by zones. You have Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4, Zone 5, Zone 6. The general principle for rotation rules is you are restricted by the players that are closest to you. For example, if I'm playing right back, I need to be in between middle back and the sideline and also behind right front. So I'm restricted by middle back and right front. For right front, I need to be in between middle front and the sideline and also in front of right back. For middle front, I need to be in between left front and right front and also in front of middle back. So I'm restricted by these three players. For left front, I need to be in between middle front and the sideline as well as in front of left back. For left back, I need to be behind left front and in between middle back and the sideline. For middle back, I need to be behind middle front and in between left and right back. So I'm restricted by these three players. A 5-1 offense means that you have 5 hitters at all times and you have 1 setter setting all the way around the court in the back row and the front row. Now we'll talk about what each of these symbols mean. S stands for setter. H1, also known as L1, stands for the first outside hitter. The 1 means that position is closest to the setter. The other outside hitter, also known as the H2 or the L2, is furthest away from the setter. Usually the H1 is a stronger hitter because this outside hitter will be with a front row setter for 2 rotations, which means there's a higher chance of hitting against more blockers. The H2 generally is a stronger passer than the H1 and may not be as strong of an attacker as the H1. This means that the H2 will only be with a front row setter for 1 rotation, and 2 of those 3 rotations they will be able to hit with 3 hitters, which means fewer blockers because you will have 3 hitters in the front row with the H2. M2 means the middle furthest away from the setter. M1 means the middle closest to the setter. These numbers mean the exact same thing as for the outside hitters. The M1 will usually be a stronger attacker compared to the M2 because this middle will be with a front row setter for 2 out of the 3 front row rotations. The M2 will be with a front row setter for only 1 out of the 3 front row rotations. Also, if your middle is more effective off of 1 foot, such as running a back slide, then that's a better position for the M1 because for 2 out of the 3 rotations, this middle can run a slide without interfering with a right side attacker. The R stands for right side attacker or opposite hitter, and this hitter is opposite of the setter. Notice that all the positions are directly opposite of each other. Both outsides are opposite of each other, middles are opposite, and the setter and the right side are opposite of each other. For a 5-1 offense, usually you will have 3 primary passers, the 2 outside hitters and the libero. Typically the right side or the opposite hitter is hidden in serve-receive and does not have to worry about passing because their main responsibility is to attack the ball. Oftentimes the opposite hitter is the strongest attacker on the team. Now we'll talk about serve-receive rotations. On the left side you will see where these positions are in rotation. On the right side you will see how they will be shifted to maximize their serve-receive rotations. In rotation 1, the setter stays back, the outside hitter shifts back to pass, the libero goes in for the middle to pass in the middle of the court, the H2 will stay where they are to pass, the right side hitter will hide in the top left corner to be ready to hit, and the M2 will also stay hidden in the middle front and not have to worry about passing the serve. Notice that even though people are shifting on the court, every position is still in rotation. The outside hitter H1 is still in front of the setter and is still between the M2 and the sideline. The M1, also the libero, is behind the M2 and in between the setter and the H2. The right side is in front of the H2 and in between the sideline and the M2. Now we'll talk about rotation 2. The setter rotates from right back to middle back. In order to have the outside hitters and the libero to pass, we will have to rotate and shift people, but still stay in rotation to be legal. The setter will push all the way up near the net. As long as they stay behind the right side hitter, they're okay. And the setter also needs to stay in between the libero and the H1. So you'll see here that the setter is pushed up and also in between the libero and the H1. The M2 needs to be between the right side attacker and the sideline, and that's the case here, and also in front of the H1. The H2 must be in front of the M1 or the libero, and also in between the right side attacker and the sideline. So here you'll see that the H2 is in front of the libero, and also to the right of the right side hitter and the sideline. In order for the H2 not to overlap with the libero, the H2 must have 1 foot in front of the libero. So they cannot be parallel, and the H2 obviously cannot be behind. They must be in front by 1 foot, as in a physical foot in front of the libero. Same thing for the right side and the setter. In order for the setter not to be overlapped with the right side, the setter must have 1 foot behind the right side in order not to overlap in front. Next, we'll move on to rotation 3. The setter has rotated from the middle back now to the left back. Our goal, as always, is to have both of the outside hitters and the libero to pass in serve-receive. Here you'll notice that the H2 is middle front, but has now stepped back to pass. The H1 passes from the middle back, and the libero for the M2 passes in the right back area. In order for the H2 to move back and pass and still hit in the front row, the H2 must be to the right of the M1. So here you'll see that the H2 is still to the right of the M1, and also in front of the H1. Here the H2 is still in front of the H1. Even though the setter is left back, the setter should try to get as close to their setting spot as possible. So the setter is restricted by the M1 and the H1. Here you'll see that the setter is still behind the M1 and in between the H1 and the sideline. The right front and the opposite hitter will move back just to help with some short passing, but mainly to focus on hitting. Next, we'll move to rotation 4. The setter has rotated from the left back now to the left front. In order for the 3 primary passers to pass, the H2 must shift all the way to the left, and to make sure that the H2 stays in rotation, the M1 also must shift to the left. So here you'll see the M1 and the H2 shift all the way to the left to make sure that the H2, H1, and the libero are passing in serve-receive. Here in serve-receive, you'll see that the M1 stays to the right of the setter, and the H2 stays to the right of the middle. Here you'll see that the H1 is not restricted by the H2, so the H1 can move up and down as freely as they want in serve-receive without having to worry about overlapping the H2 front or back. The libero for the M2 is restricted by the H1 and the right side, so the libero must stay in between the H1 and the right side. The right side is restricted by the H2 and the M2. Here you'll see that the right side is behind the H2 and also to the right of the M2 or the libero. The next rotation is number 5. The setter has now rotated from the left front to the middle front. The H1 needs to move back to pass and is restricted by the M2 and the setter. As long as the H1 stays in rotation by being in between the setter and the sideline and in front of the M2 or the libero on this side, the H1 will be in rotation and can still pass and serve receive and hit in the front row. The M2 or the libero is restricted by the H1 and the right side. Notice that the libero is behind the H1, still behind, and also in between the right side and the sideline. The right side is restricted by the M2 and the H2. Notice that the right side is between the M2 and the libero and the H2. The H2 stays in the right back to pass, and as long as the H2 does not go in front of the M1 or to the left of the right side, the H2 will be in rotation. The setter stays in the middle because that is where you want to receive the pass from, and the M1 stays in the right front to prepare to hit. The last rotation we'll talk about is rotation 6. The setter has now rotated from the middle front to the right front. The H1 will shift to the left to pass, and as long as the H1 stays in between the M2 and the setter, as it does here, it will be a legal rotation. The H2 is restricted by the H1 right side and the M1, so the H2 needs to stay behind the H1 to the right of the right side, to the left of the M1 or the libero. The M1 or the libero is restricted by the setter and the H2. So here you'll see that the libero is behind the setter and to the right of the H2. The right side is restricted by the M2 and the H2. So the right side is behind the M2 and to the left of the H2. And the setter can already start in the ideal receiving pass position. This rearrangement of positions going from a traditional rotation to a modern serve-receive rotation is called stacking. The reason why these positions are stacked and rearranged in this format is to allow the 3 primary passers to pass all the time in serve-receive, and also allow the other positions to get as close to their natural spiking or setting position as possible. For example, you'll notice that 5 out of the 6 rotations, the outside hitters for the front row are able to pass more on the left side of the court, which allows them to hit more from the left side out of serve-receive. One important rule to learn is that no position is allowed to overlap until the server contacts the ball. The moment that the server contacts the ball, the setter can release all the way to the net, and other positions can start to shift and overlap with each other. So if you're a setter, make sure that you do not leave toward the net until the server has contacted the ball. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found this video helpful, make sure that you give this video a thumbs up and share it with all of your volleyball friends and teammates who are trying to learn serve-receive rotations for a 5-1 offense. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel where I'll be releasing weekly volleyball tutorial videos just like this one. If you have any other suggestions regarding volleyball, athletic training, or fitness, make sure that you search my YouTube channel before providing a video suggestion. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.